There are roughly 40 seconds every morning that determine the shape of your entire day. Your alarm fires. Your eyes open in the dark. And before a single conscious thought has formed, something deeper in your brain has already run the calculation. The cold floor. The long day ahead. That thing you told yourself you would finally start. And it has already made the decision. Your hand reaches out. The alarm goes quiet. You tell yourself you will make up for it later. And 40 seconds after that, you are asleep again, having lost a negotiation you were never awake enough to enter. Around noon, the guilt arrives on schedule. You open a new tab. You watch another video about self-discipline. You write a new plan in cleaner handwriting than the last one. And for about 3 days, it works. Then it doesn't. And you land in the exact same place, asking the exact same question you have been asking for years. What is wrong with me? The answer most people will hand you is willpower. They will tell you that you are soft, that you do not want it badly enough, that the people who have what you want simply pushed harder than you were willing to push. That story is not just wrong, it is precisely backwards. And the inversion is where everything you have been trying to fix actually lives. If you have spent years blaming your character for something that was never about character, subscribe and leave a like. And at the end, leave a comment with the one specific habit you have been fighting yourself over the longest. Read what other people write. The pattern in the responses is going to tell you something. In 2012, a team of psychologists led by Wilhelm Hoffmann and Roy Baumeister ran a study that should have permanently retired the willpower story. They interrupted people throughout their normal days and asked what they were craving, what they were resisting, and how they were handling it. If discipline were fundamentally about force, the most disciplined people in the study should have been the ones resisting the most, fighting the hardest, white-knuckling their way through the most temptations. They found the exact opposite. The people who scored highest in self-control reported weaker desires, less internal conflict, and dramatically less resistance overall. They were not winning a fight, they were somehow not in one. Which reframes the entire problem. The skill you have been trying to build for years, gritting your teeth, forcing your way through, pushing past resistance, that is not discipline. That might not even be adjacent to discipline. The most self-regulated people in the research were not better at overriding their impulses. They had structured their lives in ways that produced fewer impulses worth overriding. That distinction matters more than almost anything else you will hear on this topic. Because if discipline is fundamentally about force, then the solution is to try harder. And if you have already been trying hard for years without results, trying harder is just more of what has not worked. But if discipline is fundamentally about conditioning, about what your nervous system has learned to expect and predict, then the solution is completely different. And so is the problem. Send this to the person in your life who keeps starting over every Monday. Because what the next section explains is why the restarting is not a character flaw. It is a predictable result of how conditioning actually works. In 1992, a researcher named Robert Eisenberger published a paper introducing a concept he called learned industriousness. The central idea is one of those things that sounds almost too convenient to be true, which is usually the sign that it is important. Effort is not merely a decision. Effort is a sensation. It has a specific physical texture. The heaviness in your chest before a hard task. The tightness behind your eyes when you sit down to do something that matters. The pull toward the exit that activates before you have consciously decided anything. And because effort is a sensation, it can be conditioned. It responds to the same associative learning mechanisms that condition a taste, a smell, or a sound. Eisenberger's research demonstrated that when effort is repeatedly followed by reward, the sensation of effort itself begins to carry reward value. The heaviness stops registering as a warning signal and starts registering as a cue that something good is approaching. What was previously read as pain begins to be read as anticipation. And the part that should change how you see every disciplined person you have ever admired, that conditioning generalizes. Train it in one domain and it transfers into unrelated areas of your life. Liking effort is not a personality type that was assigned to you at birth. It is a learned association. Some people were conditioned into it by their environments without ever knowing it happened. Most people were not. That is the entire difference between the person who springs out of bed at 5 in the morning and the person who hits snooze 6 times. Not genetics, not virtue. Association. To understand how to build that association, you need to understand something about dopamine that almost everyone gets slightly wrong. And where the correction lives is where all the leverage is. Dopamine is widely described as the reward chemical. That framing is accurate enough to be misleading. In the 1990s, a neuroscientist named Wolfram Schultz was recording individual dopamine neurons while animals learned to anticipate a reward. Initially, the dopamine burst fired at the moment the reward arrived, straightforward enough. But as the animal learned that a light reliably preceded the reward, something unexpected happened. The dopamine signal moved. It stopped firing at the reward and started firing at the light, and when the reward showed up exactly as predicted, the neurons barely responded at all. The signal had migrated backwards in time, detaching from the prize and reattaching to whatever reliably predicted the prize. Think about what that means for the specific problem you came here with. Your brain is not producing that dopamine spike when you finish a task. It is producing it the moment you pick up your phone, because your phone reliably predicts something stimulating. That is why reaching for it feels like relief before you have even unlocked the screen. Your brain has run that loop thousands of times and written the prediction in permanent ink. Now ask the harder question. What does opening your notebook reliably predict for you right now? What does the first minute at your desk reliably predict? For most people, if they answer honestly, the prediction is not good. It predicts strain. It predicts the uncomfortable discovery of how far behind they are. It predicts self-criticism that will last for the rest of the session. So the brain does exactly what it was designed to do. It flinches before you consciously decide anything. You do not have a discipline problem. You have a prediction problem. And unlike character, predictions can be rewritten. Understanding where your current predictions came from is not about assigning blame. It is about locating the mechanism so you can intervene in the right place. Think back to how effort was actually responded to in the environment you grew up in. Not what was said, but what produced warmth, attention, and relief. In almost every case, it was the outcome. The grade on the report card, the trophy, the finished project, the acceptance letter, the number that came back from the test. Everyone celebrated the result. And the weeks of unglamorous, often boring, often frustrating work that produced it? It went largely unacknowledged, at best, unmentioned. At worst, you were told you should have started earlier or worked harder, which means your nervous system drew the only reasonable conclusion available to it. Effort is the toll. Effort is the unpleasant cost you pay at the gate, and the reward lives on the other side. Under that arrangement, effort never once gets paired with anything rewarding, which is the precise opposite of the condition Eisenberger showed. You need to build learned industriousness. There is a version of this that operates differently but arrives at the same problem. If you were the person who found things easy early on, who got the good results without much visible effort, you were rewarded specifically for not needing to try hard. Effort, in that context, became evidence of a deficiency. It meant something was wrong, that you were not as capable as everyone had been saying. So the moment a task became genuinely difficult, the whole identity flinched. The laptop closed before anyone could see the struggle. Different path, identical destination. A nervous system that has categorized effort as pure cost. Here is the part that explains why years of trying harder may have made things measurably worse, not better. Every time you have forced yourself through a session, the workout you dragged yourself to, the 2 hours of work you pushed through on pure gritted teeth, how did it end? Almost certainly not with satisfaction. It ended with you closing the laptop and thinking about how little you got done, how far behind you still are, how much more you need to do tomorrow. The last thing your brain filed alongside the sensation of effort was punishment, which means you have been conditioning, just in the wrong direction. Every forced, joyless, self-critical session is a repetition that teaches your nervous system that effort reliably predicts feeling bad about yourself. The harder you force, the more clearly that lesson gets encoded, which is why people who have tried the hardest are often the ones who now feel the most visceral resistance to beginning. Their brains have learned the lesson thoroughly and are doing exactly what a well-trained brain does, protecting them from a predicted negative outcome. The fix cannot be more force. More force is more repetitions of the wrong association. And this is the place where the standard productivity advice does the most damage, because it tells you that the solution to conditioning is willpower, which just adds more of the thing that is making the problem worse. So the question is not how to want discipline more. You cannot decide to enjoy something any more than you can decide to find a smell pleasant. The question is how to change what the act of working predicts. Here are 5 specific ways to do it. The first is to pay the effort, not the outcome. This is Eisenberger's finding converted into a rule. Stop attaching reward to results. Results are slow, unreliable, and largely outside your control, which makes them terrible conditioning tools. Attach the reward to the act itself. The moment you finish a session, before you evaluate the quality of anything that happened, you mark it. You acknowledge that you showed up. Whatever form that takes, it has to happen within seconds of the effort ending, and it has to be unconditional on results. Your ego will resist this. It will feel like rewarding mediocrity. But you are not grading performance. You are building an association between a sensation and a reward. The pairing only works if the effort itself is what gets paid. The second is to move the reward to the doorway instead of the exit. Since dopamine migrates backwards onto whatever predicts the reward, you deliberately place something genuinely good at the entrance of the hard thing rather than the end of it. A 2014 experiment by Catherine Milkman and colleagues at Wharton illustrated this cleanly. They gave participants compelling audiobooks they actually wanted to keep listening to, but with one rule: they could only listen at the gym. Attendance increased by roughly half. The workout stopped being the cost of admission and became the only place the good thing lived. Your version of this might be a specific coffee you only drink at your desk, a particular album that only plays while you are working on the thing you avoid, or a ritual that exists exclusively at the threshold of the hard task. One condition applies without exception: it has to be exclusive. If you access it outside the context, it predicts nothing and conditions nothing. The third is to shrink the entry point until refusing it is genuinely absurd. Your brain does not resist work. It resists the anticipated size of the work. Write the chapter triggers a flinch. Open the document and write one sentence does not, because there is nothing there to dread. You reduce the entry point until saying no to it feels irrational. 2 minutes, 1 paragraph, 1 set. And the entry point is the full commitment. If you stop there, it counted. A 2010 study tracking habit formation at University College London found that automaticity comes from repetition in a consistent context, taking somewhere around 2 months on average with enormous variation across individuals. But the finding worth holding is this one: missing a single day did not break the curve. It did not reset anything. The people whose habits failed were the ones who stopped entirely, not the ones who slipped once. The cost of this approach is that it feels insultingly small. That is exactly correct. Small is what you can repeat, and repetition is the only currency this system accepts. The fourth is to design the environment rather than your resolve. Return to what the highly disciplined people in Hoffman's study were actually doing. They were not resisting more temptations. They were engineering their surroundings to encounter fewer. Follow-up research confirmed they do this deliberately. Students with higher self-control were more likely to choose the quiet study room over the social one before the work ever began. That is the entire strategy. Every decision you make about your environment while you are calm and not yet tired is a decision your exhausted late-night self does not have to win. Phone in a different room rather than face down on the desk. The distracting app deleted rather than resisted. The tools for the work laid out the night before. You are not being avoidant by removing temptation. You are doing precisely what the most effective self-regulators in the research already do, and doing it on purpose. The fifth is to never end a session on failure. This one is the smallest and maybe the most powerful, because it directly repairs the conditioning damage that comes from the forced, joyless sessions we talked about earlier. The last 30 seconds of any session are what your brain files and uses to build tomorrow's prediction. So stop ending in the wreckage. Do not finish a workout on the set you could not complete. Do not close the laptop while spiraling about how little you produced. Deliberately end on something small that you can finish cleanly. One easy set, one complete sentence, one small task closed, then stop there on purpose while it still feels like a win. You are writing the final line of the record your nervous system will consult tomorrow, when it decides whether to let you begin. Make it a win every single time, even a small one, because the size of the win matters far less than the fact that one exists. Do this consistently and something quiet happens over time. The work does not become easy. Hard things stay hard. What changes is not the difficulty. It is the argument. That 40-second negotiation at the alarm. The internal courtroom that assembles every time you sit down. The daily vote on whether you are the kind of person who does this. That goes quiet. Not because you conquered it. Because your nervous system stopped having a reason to convene it. More than a century before anyone could record a dopamine neuron, William James wrote that the entire purpose of building habits is to make the nervous system your ally instead of your enemy. Not to overpower it. Not to declare war on yourself every morning and lose. To get the part of you that already made the decision before you woke up working in the same direction as the part of you that wants a different life. That is all discipline ever was. Not force. Not virtue. A nervous system that has been given enough evidence to expect something good. Drop a comment with the one habit you have been fighting yourself over the longest. And be specific, because the more specific you are, the more useful the thread becomes for everyone reading it. Subscribe to this channel if this is the kind of conversation you want more of. Share this with the person in your life who has been restarting the same habit for years and blaming their character for it. They probably do not need another motivational speech. They need to understand that it was never about character. It was always about conditioning. And conditioning can be rebuilt.